Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Facade podcast. And we're on episode 21 today.
21.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Okay, so I'm Doña Junta from Swami Chronicles, and welcome back to the podcast. We have a great episode today, and here's the whole gang with us today.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. Hey.
Well, introduce yourself, you guys.
Well, you guys know me, observing spooks and other vices. Sabrina here.
Yep.
Oh yeah, the Hood Historian on Instagram. How you guys doing?
We had to bring him back after probably a year, right?
Yeah, been about a year.
That's crazy. Crazy.
I know,
crazy.
time flies.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
So today we're gonna talk about the history of Central Avenue in South Central. And I still call it South Central. We could discuss of maybe now people call it other things, but just in my own personal opinion, I just know it as South Central and I keep it that way. But we could discuss that but we're gonna discuss the history of Central Avenue and why that the Central Avenue is so important. And let us know, Sabrina, why you chose this topic, Central Avenue. Like, what came to mind when you wanted to discuss this?
Well, when we were brainstorming a month ago, of what our next podcast episode was going to be, it reminded me of the day when we were adventuring and we stopped by that Spanish Moorish theater.
The Lincoln Theater.
Yeah. And I thought we were discussing the jazz and I really had no idea about how jazzy it was over there in South Central, not so far back. And I wanted to really get in and dig into the history of South Central and the jazz movement there that no one seems to know about.
Yeah, at least from the perspective, growing up, I don't think it was never discussed. But we tied in Hood Historian because he's been a pretty great researcher of the Eagle, right? One of the main prominent Black newspapers during that time.
Another reason is jazz in general. I love jazz. I go to New Orleans as often as possible, and the connection to jazz so close to home that I didn't even know about. It brings a part of New Orleans in a way here just down the street, not far from me. And I'm sad that I didn't know this hidden history, and I'm so glad that we got to bring it to you guys today.
I could say the only time I was told some kind of jazz thing happened there was when, like 10 years ago, I was going down Slauson with some friends taking photos, low-key tagging, I have to admit, and I seen a bus stop with like a saxophone on it, and it said it was near Slauson and Central and like I think Wilmington, around that area. And I'm like, and I seen it said like jazz corridor or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, interesting, but nothing's ever been said about it fully. Maybe because I didn't research it at the time, but also it was never discussed or brought up. What about for you as far as Central Avenue? It's something you already knew about?
Yeah. So for me, I knew about it. I've seen it on KCET in the past, but things like that. But in general, unless your grandparents lived there, I'm from Long Beach. I didn't know until I saw it on public television like KCET.
Right.
And but reading the old newspapers, seeing the old jazz documentaries, a lot of jazz artists, they came to the motherland of entertainment, LA.
Right.
And a lot of Black artists, they couldn't even stay in the hotels downtown LA, so they had to do their own. And they built Central Avenue for their own entertainment, their own hotels, food. So I think all that ties into segregation.
Yeah.
It was built because they couldn't go over there and do things, with the mainstream. So they built their own. And I like that. I like things like that when they just built their own and didn't depend on anybody. Sometimes you just have to do it yourself. And that's what they did back then.
I would like to take this opportunity for you guys and all of our listeners to close our eyes just for a minute and think about South Central. What is the first kind of words that you come up with or the thoughts that you come up with when you think of South Central? And it's okay, we're learning here, guys, you know, but it's important to think about this. And this is where the stigma of South Central comes from. What do we think of? I'll go first.
Go ahead.
The first thing I thought of is, you know, the way I was raised and how I was raised. I think of South Central. I kind of think of riots. I think of maybe ghetto. It's not a nice area. That's what I thought of.
Right. For me, yeah, it was just more like the hood, right? And I think of the movies, you know, some of the movies that portray South Central. Rap. Rap has a big, and rap in itself is developed from there, maybe in the later years, but how rap portrayed it, you know, Ice Cube, South Central, and all that. And in the graffiti world, when I was in the graffiti world, we didn't really paint too much of South Central because it was dangerous as far as like getting shot at and things like that. So we kind of like were careful where we painted in South Central. So it was always like the negative. In rap, I'm not saying it's negative fully, but like it was more of like that stigma, which what we're going to learn today is the total opposite. So it's like, wow.
Yeah. What about you, hood historian?
Well, I thought of, you know, you see that on TV in the media, the bad portrayals of South Central, but then you meet people from LA. One of my middle school teachers, she was from South Central, and she was a, you know, educated, bright lady. She taught French, you know, so she was from South Central. It was just like the community vibe they had out there, Leimert Park, further west, Watts. So it's like they had all these different neighborhoods within, you know, South Central. Something you heard about in the 90s growing up, you know, in the 80s and 90s, you know. So it was in the South Central was on the map. South Central was ground zero for everything in the 90s, you know, rap, the riots, you know, so.
Yeah. I guess because we're the same generation, all of us. So we do remember more the 90s.
Yeah.
So I could see why we all kind of have that 90s perspectives because we're around the same age. But yeah, I mean, but the hopes of this episode was to really teach something that we just never got taught. Just like when we talked about Sleepy Lagoon, they didn't teach us that either.
Exactly.
You know? So this reminds me of like the Sleepy Lagoon type of atmosphere and era. And in order not to like demonize it, how they did in those days.
And like the neighborhood, Central Avenue was the point for small businesses, you know, entertainment and everything. And it wouldn't be South Central if it wasn't for the working people and the people of the neighborhood, you know.
Right.
So like the masses, they went to work every day, they paid their taxes, they wanted to eat, they wanted entertainment, they wanted their relatives to have some place to stay. So it really was the focal point of the community at the time.
Right, exactly. So we're going to start just some of the themes of the podcast. We're going to start about the early history of Central Avenue. How the West Coast jazz movement came to Central. And then, of course, since we talk about architecture here in this podcast a lot, we're going to talk about some of the significant buildings and architecture that were there or once there, because a lot is not there no more. And some of that are still there, you know, luckily they got saved. Basically, Central Avenue began its roots with the migration of African Americans from the South, you know, during, you know, the early turn of the century. So there was like different waves, like beginning World War I, World War II, and a lot of the waves were because, you know, California opportunity, you know, so there was like thousands and thousands of African Americans that migrated from the South during like that period of time because of the the opportunities there was here. Also, the war efforts provided them be able to get working in the jobs and the industries, because now they were able to participate in work opportunities during those war efforts. It was said by 1940s there was about 4 million African Americans that migrated to California, LA specifically. During that time, obviously there was still segregation, as Hood Historian mentioned. It was, from the research, it probably was not as they said overt like it was in the South, right? But it was still happening. It just was happening in a different type of twisted way.
Yes.
Because and I didn't, that's something that we have to really be mindful of, because it still was happening, even though what they say California or LA was a free, or what did they call it, a non-union state or whatever at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it was a non-Confederate state,
Right.
So it was still the same, It wasn't like the South, but it was still the same. You couldn't buy a house where you wanted to buy a house. You couldn't work where you wanted to work. If you had the money, you can't buy a house. You could be balling, and they were like, nope.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, we've learned from the Chinese massacre. We've learned from Sleepy Lagoon. It was the same all the way around.
Yes.
There were lines drawn up in dirt, where if you were non-white, you couldn't live in the broader areas. And South Central is no exception to that rule, unfortunately. So you can only imagine a huge migration that would have happened during, as Doña Junta mentioned, the First World War, or the Second. The huge migration, and because of the redlining, you're stuck in one area. So you can imagine that instead of building further, you're building up, and houses get tighter, and so you can only imagine how that sets the tone for the oncoming decades.
Exactly.
Yeah. And at the time, African Americans had the opportunity to be lower middle class, and they did have opportunity to buy homes, and there's a reason why how he said it was hard. But the area was Central and 41st was considered the heart of the African American community. We'll talk about the Dunbar Hotel, Somerville Hotel, why that was important. And some numbers just to kind of see, by 1930 is 17,000 people migrated to that area. 1940, about 25,000. And then the huge influx in the 40s after World War II was about 50,000 during that time. And what led the people to Central Avenue, again, was not necessarily by choice. There was a strict law or policies called housing covenants, which made it really, really hard for African Americans to buy homes in areas outside of the Central Avenue. So basically that law stated that if you were an owner, you can't sell to basically Black people. It was stated in that freaking law, housing covenant. And they only allowed a certain vicinity, which is this vicinity we're talking about, Central. Central started around downtown, around First, and it led all the way to Watts. So all kind of like that main area there was around the Jefferson, Adams, 40s. And it kind of like spread through the time, right? Where everything was kind of at.
Yeah.
I read in some articles, they referred to South Central in those days and any area that housed Black bodies. So it wasn't just, and that's hard to picture now because we have cities, like in micro cities and larger cities. But can you imagine that? So everywhere that a Black body, where they live in population, that's considered South Central.
Yeah.
So when you think of that like that, that's just, it's definitely redlining. It's blatant, and it's purposeful to keep people segregated from the broader white community.
Even though they call it South Central, as I pointed out on my page before, like each neighborhood had its own name,
Okay.
but each neighborhood had its own area. Like Vermont Knolls, Vermont Vista, um, Central Alameda, but it's just South Central,
That's
Yeah.
true. There's those little
So
nooks, those neighborhoods. And I see the signs now and people forget, like, okay, this is Florence and Firestone. This is, like you said,
yes,
Vermont Knolls. And they're not as highlighted, which I think is
exactly. That's not fair. I mean, no one cares about that in South Central, but if you go somewhere else, oh, this is this neighborhood, this is that neighborhood, but South Central has the same thing, and you can
right.
tell you're going into a different neighborhood because the way the street layouts are. It might be a different layout. The street might be wider. These houses might be different,
Right.
once you go across a certain street, but it's all South Central. And that's not a bad thing. We embrace that name, but we accept that name,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a that came later on in time, and I read some history of why it was called that later. But I think it had to do with like rap music in the 80s and 70s and 80s. It was more established South Central, and there's more history on that, why that happened.
Yeah.
So that because the housing covenant, also because Blacks were excluded from pools, beaches, and dining areas, and they had to basically have, create their own neighborhood, like you said. And
Yes.
even the fire department was excluded. The white fire department couldn't help the Black neighborhoods, so they had to make their own fire department.
Yes.
Which is like, I think that people complain about like, oh, now it's this and that. It's been like this for so long. Like, it wasn't all cozy back in those days, like it was really messed up.
And this shows you how the institutions that we are supposed to depend on are built on racism. So there's no wonder why we have police brutality, that and the prison pipeline. There's no one. I mean, I know some people are very ignorant to the situation, but from its very root, racism has drawn a line in the sand, and
yes,
the problem.
It's not, and the thing is, like, we might be in 2022, but we are still feeling the effects of that.
Right.
Like, how can a group of people have a head start for hundreds of years and like they have a head start? It's not fair. They have hundreds of years to build wealth and everything else, and protected by laws. And now they're saying, "Oh, we are equal." Well, we might be all equal, but we didn't get the hundreds of years of a head start. Right. We didn't get the free houses in the 1940s in the suburbs. When the Blacks and the non-whites, Asians and Latinos moved in, their houses were built in the 1900s. So those houses were already falling apart by the 40s and 50s,
Right.
The housing boom, those houses were built in 1940s and 50s. They were brand new houses.
Right.
And 0% down. So it's like they get houses, brand new houses. Now we have to all fight for these few houses in this one neighborhood.
Yeah, crazy.
So yeah, conditions got horrible.
Yeah,
down the line.
Exactly. They did mention that Slauson was a racial boundary, so maybe beyond Slauson was more of the white. Because I know at one time Compton was more white.
Yes.
A lot of those other cities, Southgate and all those other cities were all white too. Yeah. But anyhow, and if you ever moved out of the area, like if you try to move into a different area, not in that, you would be met with intimidation, violence, your house get raided. So it was like a huge deal.
Yeah. I also read that there was a family that moved to, I think it was Riverside, and their house was bombed.
Wow.
And the whole family perished. So that was another thing, another tactic.
Yes.
And Black people used to keep minorities, specifically Black people we're speaking about right now, out of their community.
And a lot of times the police were in cahoots, or they look the other way. Right. Sometimes you might get an arrest or something like that, but a lot of times they look the other way. The masses even though like some whites, they didn't want anything to do with that, but they didn't say nothing because they had their house, they had their family to take care of. So a lot of people just looked the other way, the
Right.
masses, you know?
Yeah, no,
So
that's true.
complicit.
So again, the housing covenants caused the area to be restricted. There was one area which is it's not on Central, but it's called the furlough track, and it was an area near Vernon where they allowed Black people to buy lots. I think there was a guy named James Furlow. He was a white guy, and he wanted to sell lots to Black people because he just felt like, oh, you know, like, and you know where that's at now? The Pueblo de Rio housing project off Alameda.
Oh,
The Pueblos, that used to be called the furlough track.
wow.
And that's where Blacks were allowed originally to buy some of the homes and lots in the area before the projects came up.
Wow, and I was going to talk about that area also in South Central in general. The city, they really lax the zoning laws over there. So it might be a commercial building next to a house, or you see that a lot in South Central. You know, there was like lots of commercial buildings with toxic waste next to a house. You go to some other neighborhood, the zoning was real strict on commercial and residential, but in LA and South Central, you see a lot of commercial and houses right next to each other.
They didn't care about the zoning at that
exactly.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So just to kind of continue how it developed, the community started to develop its own vibrant place. Central became the center of the African-American community. There was clubs, theaters, eateries, music venues. And it's interesting because all races and classes gathered here. It wasn't just Black, like they would, you know, other races would come because they were allowed, right? You know,
Yes.
they gathered here. But the funny thing that, it's not funny actually, there was hardly any press attention by the LA Times given to them. The California Eagle, as you know, hood historians research partner right there. Yeah. They were the only ones that really highlighted. The only time the LA Times would come would be like once in a great while. And the only time they would write something was when it was a negative feature about Central Avenue. Oh, some robbery, some murder, something like it would be negative. So till this day, it sucks because there's a lot of things were lost because it was never documented how it should have been. So the California Eagle was on Central. We'll talk about those outbuildings soon, but basically the whole community was built because of all these racial segregation. One of the greatest things that came out of that was the West Coast Jazz. So did you, and I didn't know about that originally. I know Sabrina didn't. And did you, I know you're a musician, right? When you were in high school?
Yes.
Did they talk about that?
Yeah, we talked about jazz across the country because the jazz is American. So yeah, we talked about that. And then doing my own research, watching documentaries, there was tons of clubs in LA and not only in New York, you know, Chicago. So this is one of the stops. Central Avenue was one of the stops when you made it big. It was just one of the many stops the greats played, you know. Not just Hollywood, Central Avenue.
Right. And that's like, what the heck, man? Like, yeah, you're right. A lot of the influence of the jazz came from New Orleans, Harlem, New York, Chicago, Kansas City. Because of the migration, everybody brought their influence. And it started the West Coast jazz movement over here.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's, I don't know, to me, when I heard that, I was like, I feel like, again, it wasn't why didn't we have a topic like that in our history classes, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't
important
there.
California history.
Yes, it is. A lot of culture down there that was once down there.
When we think of famous people and famous performers, a lot of those famous performers performed on Central and a lot of the clubs and stayed at the Dunbar. But they had to walk out, excuse me, they had to walk out like the back door if they were in Hollywood. Yes. on the flip side, those white people that were being entertained in Hollywood could come see them at the Dunbar, but not vice versa. You know, so it's a pretty interesting, because we don't think about so much entertainment in one area. When we think of it all in, you know, Hollywood or the likes of that, or in downtown Los Angeles, but not necessarily in this small or smaller area, more condensed area.
Right. So, you know, the jazz clubs were some of the best jazz clubs around, right? All around Central. And I kind of want at the end, when we talk about our thoughts now, it's really sad because you don't see none of that anymore. It's pretty much washed out. But there was a lot of amazing clubs. Did you get to look into any? I know the Club Alabama, Sabrina.
Yeah, the ones that you mentioned, those are all the ones that I saw. I didn't see too much. And a lot of this, we were both discussing this a little bit earlier, me and Doña Junta. A lot of this information is hard to find. So but we did all the Club Alabama was a very popular club. And I think it was, I'm trying to find the address. We went to go see it, but obviously it's no longer there as a club, or as, you know, it's just a building, a facade of something else, but it's from described, it's down the way from the Dunbar, and the Dunbar's still there. So you could still go see the Dunbar.
Yeah, so some of the clubs were Casablanca, Club Joy, Cafe Zombie, Lovejoy's. There was just tons. I mean, we probably can't even name them all, because they were just up and down the strip of Central, from downtown all the way to Watts, which is, I would love to see that. And there's hardly any pictures of any of that.
Yeah.
Did you find any on the newspapers, or not really?
I did, but like I said, I'm having technical difficulties on my archives. So the ads I do have are the ones I already clipped out already in the past.
Yeah. So maybe there's some ads left, but as far as actual photos, it was hard to find just basic.
Oh yeah, like the photos. Yeah, it's hard to find basic photos because it wasn't documented like the LA Times would have done it. And the California Eagle, they have some awesome photographers, but even then it's hard to find because it was just a strip of a couple miles, you know. So it's like it's just hard to find.
Actually, it was pretty long. I think they said like 14 miles, like if you count from Watts to downtown. But like it was just the fact that it was not as important to mainstream society to document it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's why I like the California Eagle, because the California Eagle has the advertisements of different clubs, smaller clubs, and the mainstream clubs, and all these restaurants, you know, and some of them have entertainment.
We just have to use our imagination and imagine how it looked at the time. I mean, Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset and all those, you know, streets, they're still there from when it started, and it still looks like that. Yeah. We have to imagine how Central was, because it's no longer that. And the thing is, that reminds me of Nipsey Hussle, because Nipsey Hussle wanted to turn Crenshaw and Slauson back into a destination. He wanted people to come. Yeah, Nipsey Hussle wanted Crenshaw and Slauson to be a destination for his Marathon store and other businesses. There's no need to go to La Brea or shop downtown or Hollywood or Beverly Hills. You can do it all in South Central on Crenshaw Boulevard. So he had that vision to bring community back. So he had that vision over there, you know, farther west, in the Crenshaw area. And the infrastructure is there. You know, a lot of buildings are still there. The way the neighborhood is set up, even in Compton, the city of Compton Boulevard, if you go down Compton Boulevard, it has businesses, commercial buildings lined up. They always been there since the 1920s and 30s. A lot of storefronts are empty.
But then I think about a city like Huntington Park. Huntington Park, what is that? Santa Fe Avenue? They have all those shops.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That place is thriving. That strip is, it's been like that. Those buildings are from the 1920s and 30s also.
Yeah.
And it's like they have their own destination in HP. Why can't Central Avenue do that again? Why can't Compton Boulevard do that again?
Right. No, that's very true. Very true.
So people go to Huntington Park to shop on that street,
Yeah.
And we know about it, and people in other cities know about it. And I'm not even, I'm a black dude, and I know about HP in those neighborhoods, that strip of businesses right there. I like stuff like that, because people are making money, people are getting entertained, people are shopping in an old area that's always been like that, because the infrastructure is there already. They don't have to build anything new. Everything's there already.
No, yeah, I agree. It's, and that's the thing. It's why isn't this happening? Just to go back to, I do have the list of the names of the clubs. So the famous jazz clubs, some of the main ones was, again, Club Alabama, the Apex, the Downbeat, the Flame, Casablanca, Club Joy, Cafe Society, Cafe Zombie, Lovejoy's. So, I mean, that's just a little handful, right? But, I mean, imagine these places still there. I mean, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
I'll go for a couple of them. Shit.
Yeah.
A couple of them. Yeah. But you know what? And the music lives on through the people.
Yeah. And when we talk about Jefferson High, I'll talk about how that was very important with the jazz era. But some of the jazz that developed here was jazz bebop. I guess it's a certain type of jazz. Do you know that?
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
Dizzy Gillespie, he was into bebop, so it was just a lot of syncopated rhythms.
Okay.
So it's hard to describe, but.
Well, you gotta send me something so I could add it to the audio.
And it was a lifestyle too, they had the look, they had the little.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a way they had the bebop ones. Yeah.
Oh, so if you send me some audio, we'll add it here so people could hear that, some of the bebop. But I guess that kind of started here based on all the influence from everything.
Yeah.
And then next we're going to kind of go into some of the significant architecture of Central that is there and not there. But the main hub of everything was the Dunbar Hotel before it used to be Somerville, and Sabrina's going to talk about that. Let me just pull up a couple of photos. Let me just share my screen. For those that are watching on YouTube, you can see that, and I'll describe what I'm sharing now. This is just a corner of Central Avenue, a random corner with some shops, which doesn't look like this anymore.
No.
Yeah. I did a dinner now of that building.
You did?
A couple of years ago. Yeah,
Nice.
before I did the videos. Yeah, it was just
How does it look now?
It looks the same, actually. It's just, some of the windows been filled up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a view of the Dunbar on Central over here on the part of it. So if you want to go ahead and then let me just jump to the Dunbar. Here we go. So if you want to go ahead and, why was this place so important to Central Avenue?
As a hood historian was saying earlier, we have the African American community making their community. They had no help from anyone else. They had to make their community literally. So a married couple named John and Vada Somerville, they were graduates of USC and in dentistry. And they purchased the building and purchased that spot and made the Somerville Hotel. And it was very, very important. It was built in 1928, and it was to be first-class lodgings for African Americans in their community, as very important, influential people could that are Black African American could not stay in anywhere else. They couldn't stay in any nice hotels anywhere in Los Angeles, as we've already discussed. And it was really important as they had one. They built it for the first convention of West Coast convention of the NAACP. That's really, really important. And let's see, a very large, very nice hotel, over 100 rooms, Art Deco lobby with cafes and restaurant, a beauty parlor. It was really the hub of the Black culture in South Central and on Central Avenue. And many prominent people would commune there from the very beginning. Eventually,
I'm gonna pause you real quick. I hear feedback. Hood Historian and me will mute ourselves. So in case it's us.
Okay. Due to the pause this for a second, because I'm trying to think of the word. I did not write this down. The friggin' the collapse in the 1920s. The collapse of the things, help me guys, because I can't think of the word.
Yeah, the stock market crash.
Stock market crash.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I write this down? Okay, I'm ready again. Thank you. Due to the
Sabrina,
yeah.
I think the feedback's from your shirt. Does it hit your mic?
No, my hair maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's because it's like a rustling sound.
Yeah, it must be my hair, not my shirt. Well, maybe my shirt, but probably my hair.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, due to the Stark, okay, that's okay. Wayne's gonna take all this shit out. Due to the stock market crash in the 20s, we believe that's part of the reason why the Somervilles had to had to give up the Somerville Hotel. And when they let go of the hotel, it went through many different hands. There were many different owners until what it is today. We have a gentleman named Lucius Lomax, and he changed the name to Dunbar Hotel. And he changed it to honor Paul Laurence Dunbar, the African-American poet. And there's a couple of his poems or one specifically that's very popular, at least a couple of the phrases, the lines from one of his poems that Maya Angelou repeated her own self. And I didn't know anything about that. So it was really interesting to find this information. Let's see, it was owned by a gentleman named Reverend Major Jealous Divine for a time. In 1936, a gentleman named James Jimmy Nelson with his nephew, Silas King Jr. owned it. And they wanted to make it the hub of the jazz to what we're talking about now. And they wanted to give it a mix of the Waldorf to make it look similar and have the vibe of the Waldorf Astoria and the Cotton Club. So a mix between the two of them. And let's see, at some point in 1957, Silas King's son purchased the hotel. And then he had to sell it in the mid 60s. So it went to different hands throughout the time. But when we're going too far ahead of ourselves, because by that time the jazz had already dwindled. But during the reign of the jazz, it would have been around the time that Lucius Lomax and Silas King Jr. had hold and care for it and molded it to be the jazz hub that it was. It's really important that we highlight John and Vada Somerville and their efforts to build the Somerville Hotel, which became the Dunbar Hotel. And in my readings, I was reading about, and picture this, guys, the Somerville Hotel being described as any given day, a stranger could just walk down the street and see famous people in the lobby. And many people built their careers by just randomly meeting people playing jazz or seeing a famous person there. We got to remember that this building that you're looking at right now, That was where the creme de la creme of African American performers stayed at. This is where they stayed at, where you can imagine how famous people are, especially musicians, where they have all night music sessions. And this is where they stayed at. And so this, it gives me, I'm getting chills talking about it right now. Me and Doña Junta went to go visit it. And that was an amazing thing. And we'll talk about that later. But it gives me chills to think about what happened from its beginning days in the late 1920s, 1928, from the West Coast meeting with the NAACP, and all the things that they talked about, beautifying or adding to the community or protecting their community, down to this vibrant jazz. This community, it had a beautiful culture, and we know nothing about it. And I can't help but think that that's a purpose, that they purposely hid this shit.
Mm-hmm.
But why? And I guess we can think about that for a minute and discuss that part later.
Yeah. And you mentioned that because we did visit the hotel, and we'll say the story of how we got in. But there was like one of the top prime famous musicians were there, like
oh yeah,
Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, like so many people. It's
yes,
like, wow.
Yes.
Louis Armstrong. I mean, I have a list right here. I'll tell you guys just a couple. Lena Horne, Cab Calloway, Ella Fitzgerald, Sammy Davis Jr. In the Dunbar, we saw big photos of Dorothy Dandridge performing there. I mean, Dorothy Dandridge. I mean, like, and again, I'm getting chills because I love these people. Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, and a bunch of other people that are very important, or maybe not as known. But like, this was the hub of music and culture in Los Angeles, and jazz. So you can, I don't know, especially when I go to New Orleans, when you hear the jazz, that wasn't just that, even though it came from there, it was right here, just down the street.
It was.
And if you see the photos of the people, and it's hard to find photos, but I did see some, and you just see these beautiful people and these beautiful Black women with their hair in the 1930s, 1940s with the big flowers. And just like you think of the 1940s, and you think of white women, or we think of our, zoot suiters, and you see these other women and they're all jazzed up in their silk, and I just think of rum and cigarettes, and I can smell it. It makes me so happy. And then it's sad because it's been lost, but it seems like there's a revitalization, and we'll talk about that later. But the Dunbar Hotel is so special and so important because it was the hub for the Black community in South Central.
Yes.
Yeah. So that I know, and I really enjoyed exploring it that time. Were you pretty aware of the Dunbar from your research, hood historian?
Yeah. Yes, I was. I was very aware of the Dunbar. I never made it inside like you guys, but I made pilgrimage. I made a pilgrimage over there many times, and like, if you don't know, you'll drive right past it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, if you don't know, you drive right past it.
I think we did initially. We did, and we had to turn right and go up the block and come back.
Yeah. So next, we're just going to go over some of the architecture, other buildings that are significant, and then we'll get into the businesses that Hood Historian talks about in some of the ads. So again, this is the view of Central during the heyday. This is more towards the downtown part. Also during the heyday. This does not look like this anymore.
No.
This is 1940s, and then I love this theater. It's the Lincoln Theater.
Yes.
This is a photo from the 50s, but the Lincoln Theater was actually built in 1926 in Moorish style architecture. I hadn't been to it until maybe last year when we were just doing some exploring, and I ran into it online. I'm like, what the heck? This theater looks amazing, and it's been shut down. Well, it's kind of a church. You know how that goes with the churches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty kept original on the outside. And it's not, some of the history of it is not what you would think it would be now, because again, the churches, they bought it, they could rent it, and it's lost its character. I wish it could be restored to what it was, back in the days, because
that would be amazing.
Beautiful.
It is gorgeous.
Even like the Mayan theater that's still used as a venue or club and stuff like that, this one never really made it that far. It kind of more got bought by the churches. Again, maybe money was involved. There's nobody that wanted to take it on.
Yeah.
This is another one, the 28th Street YMCA. So this one we kind of ran into, well, it was an accident. We were looking for it, but
wow,
we kind of went in there on accident. So the 28th Street YMCA was a YMCA that was specifically for Black, because they were not allowed at any other YMCA. Remember, the pools and beaches were restricted, so this was like a pool and obviously an athletic area and things like that specifically for the neighborhood, because again, they were not allowed to go anywhere else, which is crazy to even say. But this is the main hub of where you could go recreational sports, swimming at this YMCA. So it's a pretty important place, and it was at the time and still is. It's not a YMCA anymore. It is low income housing for formerly homeless and low income folks. So they did try to save as much as they can and kind of the spirit of it. But we did get a chance to go in, which we will share towards the end about the today part.
Yeah.
But you see right there, it's a boys' entrance and the men's entrance, which I thought that was interesting. I wonder why that would be. I mean, if it is that just like
because the reason why the YMCA was there in the very beginning, before the recreational purposes, is it served as housing for, like, we talk about the migration of many African Americans from the South, right? So not all of them had families or had even income, and they needed somewhere to stay, and this is where you would stay if you had nowhere else to stay. And it offered you a place to stay, like you hear the old song, "It's fun to stay at the YMCA." It's like, that's where you stay until you can get on your feet, or you get a job, or you go to school, or so forth. So it was really like, I don't want to say a homeless shelter, but it was more than that.
Right.
But it was needed. And it was, I think it was there as the first, African American. I think when I read on it, it said colored, and I hate that word, but that's what it said. The first colored, YMCA. Not unit, but YMCA. Yeah.
Did you go here, Hood Historian? Have you seen it?
I mean, I don't even remember it. I don't remember this building. It's nice.
It jumps out at you. Let me tell you.
On the side street. Yeah.
I don't remember seeing this.
Yeah,
it's cool. It's across the street from a Victorian, and then they have an island in the middle now. I think we found it by chance, right?
Well,
we were looking for it, but I didn't think it was still like pretty kept.
It looks like that.
Yeah.
It still has.
I've seen so many buildings. I don't remember it. Wow. Maybe I have. I don't know, but
now it's a 28th Street apartments, but they kind of kept the outside pretty because it's a registered landmark too, so they couldn't change a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of times, when they do that, at least they have the outside.
Yeah,
they might gut the inside, but the outside, I can dig that.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, we went beyond the facade that day.
We did.
Yeah. So, you guys are bold. I'm just really walking in.
We're gonna bring you along one day.
Yeah, you gotta remember, I'm a paranormal investigator. I'm used to walking into random places and getting where I can get in. Going your junta.
Okay.
No. So the Jefferson High School. The reason I want to bring this up, not only because the architecture is great, obviously, the streamlined, modern, and we found this on accident the first time. I probably passed by there, but I never like looked until, you know how we have different eyes now because we look at history now.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
Yeah.
So it popped out at me and I'm like, oh, okay. But it does have a great history because this is actually the second building. The first building was destroyed in the 1933 quake that we all love, that destroyed all of beautiful Gothic classical.
Yeah.
But you know, I can't hate on this building. It's just as good. So Jefferson High is right there in the neighborhood off Central Avenue. And why it's significant is because so many of the musicians, actors, a lot of people came out of the school. This guy, he was one of the main music teacher, Samuel R. Brown of Jefferson High School from 1936 to 1961. And he's a graduate of USC, the first Black graduate from the School of Music. He graduated with honors. He traveled as a musician, doing different things before he got started teaching at Jefferson. So he first got a job at the YMCA that we just looked at, doing some kind of class, I think at night. And then he was like, man, I grew up on Central. He went to Jefferson High. He wanted to give back. So he decided to apply there. Now, mind you, Jefferson High was an all-Black student school, but the faculty was all white. Administration was all white. How fucking weird is that, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, I didn't really even put that into perspective. Like, they didn't allow, you know, Black teachers to teach, and he took the risk and he applied, and they let him teach at night at night, like a night class.
Wow.
Got to keep him in the dark, right?
Yeah.
So he started teaching a night class music, and then little by little, as he started getting more prominence there, they pretty much gave him, you know, full-time status. But a lot of times, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But originally, when he first applied and got the job at night, a lot of the faculty, like the white faculty, like they fled. They're like, oh, we're transferring. We don't want to be here. I'm like, wow. So he started teaching, and he was like one of those people that was like, he went in all the way. Like, he used to be at the school at 6 a.m. and leave 6 in the afternoon. He worked 7 days. He was just like the most dedicated music teacher that you'll I guess ever meet, according to what they said. So he basically was a great influence to some of the people that ended up becoming famous musicians that played later on in the clubs on Central. So let me tell you how they described him. So Dr. Brown, they said he wasn't intimidating, he was commanding. Thin and soft-spoken, he stood spine straight, over 6 feet tall, impeccably dressed, and professional 3-piece suits, pressed pocket handkerchiefs, and shoes that gleam like glass. So he came like a pro every single day.
He showed up.
Yes. Yeah. And I could imagine somebody like that. You see that in movies, like this renowned like professor people respect, but like he was the real deal. And
I wonder where he lived.
After or during?
Like during, like he must have lived in the neighborhood. You think?
Yeah, he did, because he grew up there, and you know he lived there. Well, he did go to USC, and he said it was hard when he was at USC because it was expensive still at the time, and he had to like shine shoes in downtown. His aunt and uncle helped pay for it, so he had to work on weekends in the church choir or church music or something like that. So that helped pay for his school at the time. Which now it's probably even more unaffordable, but for him, he did whatever he could to pay for the school. And then while he was teaching at Jefferson, he brought like people like Nat King Cole, Lionel Hamilton, Stan Kenton, Jimmy Lucifer, Shelley Maine, George Shearing, Ethel Waters, all these people that were like already prominent musicians to come to show their students.
Wow. So they came in and sat in?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, we had a couple people sit in our classes when I went to Poly in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And your music class?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that would have been
But
inspiring.
that was like the golden
Yeah.
era names right there, you know?
Right?
Wow.
Yes. And then somebody quoted, all musicians and music was happening at Jefferson. So this guy, this man, he was just the elite of the elite for music and brought so many people on and inspired so many young people. And just overall, Jefferson does have a lot of people that graduated for all kinds of different things over the years.
Yeah.
Politicians. There was journalists. There's actors. Like all kinds of people came from Jefferson. So it has a lot of respect in that sense. Even though we don't hear about some of these schools that you hear about, these elite preppy schools, but not the school in the hood that brought some amazing people out.
Yeah.
Another one was the Black Panther office, which we had no idea that was right there on Central.
Yeah.
It looks like a plain old building now with no kind of anything or spirit of it. So did you guys know about this? Did you know about this office?
Yeah, I know about the office.
Yeah, it's not very
it's in, you can't distinguish it whatsoever.
You will drive right past it. Another building you will drive right by.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and the building's still there, but it just doesn't have any kind of anything. I think it's just a regular trinket shop or something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's sad.
Yeah.
So and then here you go, if you want to get into like some of the businesses, what was going on Central business wise? Because
so business wise, it was just like any other neighborhood. You know, we needed to eat, we needed repairs, we needed our laundry done.
Mm-hmm.
So everything Black people had their own because they couldn't be in the mix with others, and not because of their they're doing. So they had to make it work, and this is showcasing how they made it work.
Yep.
Now check this out: Perfection Bakery Store. Just like in the other neighborhood, they had their own bakery.
So for those that are hearing the audio, what does it say? If you want to read the ads, maybe.
Yes, it says try our delicious pumpkin pies during the holidays at I'm trying to sound like a commercial.
Yeah,
I know. I liked your diction there. Perfect.
Yeah. So the place is called Perfection Bakery Store, and the address was 3815 Central Avenue.
Right.
So obviously, I clipped this out of a holiday issue, and this is from the California Eagle.
Yeah, so just to piggyback on the California Eagle, I just looked up real quick when that started, and it started in 1879 with John Neilmore. He started that newspaper. And one thing I did learn was the Los Angeles Sentinel was also a Black newspaper, which I had no idea. They don't say it.
That's still around. They're on Crenshaw.
But they don't say it. They don't, not them now, but they didn't say it really back then. Or in the research, it doesn't come up like at all. So that was just sad. But
the Sentinel has an Instagram page also.
Okay, we gotta follow that.
They're still around. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a couple more ads here. What are we seeing here?
So we have the new Club Alabama advertisement, and then the taco. I think this ad is from the 1950s, and the taco corner, and that's on Western Avenue, off of Central. But then we got Shakey's number 2, and it looks like American Food on 35th and Central. So obviously it's a second location. So the businesses were thriving, little small businesses were thriving, and you can just drive up to Western, you can drive up to Central, you could drive down Santa Barbara. That's Martin Luther King today, but they had their own community.
Okay, yeah. So it was called Shakey's Fabulous number 1.
It says Shakey's #2,
Oh, okay.
and it, I don't know what kind of restaurant it was, but
And
they,
fried shrimps, their specialty. It looks amazing. Or
yeah,
sounds amazing, at
sounds
least. Now I'm
good. Yeah,
hungry. Yeah, I'm starving
exactly.
now.
Okay, so let's see the next ad. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so let's look at
Wait,
the TV.
hold on a second. Let me go back to it. Hold on. Sorry about that, you guys. And
That's okay.
technical difficulties.
Yeah, they happen to the best of us.
Yes.
Share screen. Okay, let me go back. Can you guys see it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Almost. There
Okay,
we
here
go.
we go. Okay, so check this out. So we have just a general TV and stereo repair shop. And just like any other neighborhood, people needed their TVs repaired and the
Whoa.
the vacuum
we go.
tubes switched out on their radios and TVs. So they have to do it. They couldn't depend on no one else except for each other. So this goes to show you, and this is like it looks like the 1950s. It goes to show you that when they locked you out, you just built your own. you don't need to depend on others, you know?
Yep.
So it was just this guy, he has skills and he started his own business it's further south, on 49th in Central, but it's still on Central Avenue. And then we have Jack's Joint. Now this place, this ad, it makes you want to go, you know?
Yes, you gotta read it.
Yes. And Santa Barbara Avenue, Santa Barbara, that's MOK.
Oh,
today.
They changed it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's MOK. So I'm gonna read it. It says, when you're in the neighborhood of Santa Barbara and Central, visit Jack's Joint, where the dump jumps in the good times roll, enough to satisfy every soul. So that, I don't know what that is, but
I don't know.
it looks good. Whatever
It
that's
does.
on the plate, you know, it looks
I wanted
juicy.
to satisfy my soul. Let's go.
Yeah.
It looks like it has drinks too, because they have bartenders.
Yeah. So something like this, a smaller restaurant, it could have had live music, you know. So there were smaller venues like this also. They had entertainment, they had their own bar, and people worked hard all day, all week, and they wanted to relax, get something to eat. They would walk over there. They would walk or drive, you know. It was in the neighborhood.
Nice.
They didn't have to drive across town where they wasn't wanted across town anyway.
Yeah.
So like we had our own.
Yeah. Did you happen to see, like, I know that you had technical difficulties, but was the California Eagle have a lot of, pretty much all their stories featured this area, or from what you can remember?
Well, as the times changed, they moved further. You know, LA moved west, so they had a lot of businesses off of Western Avenue, like the Golden State Mutual Building.
Yes.
So that became the highlight of, you know, when they start moving west, because a lot of Black people start moving because conditions got real crowded.
Yes.
In South Central. So the only thing they could have done was they couldn't move across Alameda to Southgate. They start moving west, you know. So Western Avenue, Vermont, Crenshaw Boulevard. So the Black community start moving further west. So if you were prominent, you would start moving, you know, more west in LA to the Crenshaw area.
Yeah, and we were gonna discuss why kind of the end of an era, what some of the theories of what led to that, and you mentioned one too, the overcrowding. There was a connection between. Sorry, there's lawnmowers behind. Obviously, the civil rights movement, the 1965, the 64, the Watts Rebellion, that all had a lot to do with some of the reasons things changed. And when Sabrina, you brought up because people moved, it was pros and cons to that.
There was definitely pros and cons. And like we were discussing earlier, the restrictive housing covenant, the redlining. So in 1948, I believe, Shelley versus Kramer, they found it unconstitutional to bar people solely on race. So that had its pros and cons. Because I read in one of the articles that specifically, I think it mentioned Duke Ellington, that he would rather go to the Chateau Marmont instead of the Dunbar, because I think it said something like white people's ice is colder or something like that. Quote is saying, you know, he's going to chase money and opportunity, and where there was none before, now there is some. And now people that were stuck in this, you know, like little square, if you will. I know it's not a square, but bear with me, folks. In this, like, you know, specific neighborhood, and now they have opportunity to move out and grow and for more opportunities. So there becomes some of the downfall for the loss of jazz music in the community. And I also want to bring up in one of the articles I was reading, the freeways. The bringing of the 110 and the 10 freeway also just went right in the middle of, you know, South Central, and it decimated homes and neighborhoods in some areas too. So it's so important that we have the Shelley versus Kramer and barring it being illegal to discriminate based on race and as far as housing is going, but it also kind of self-destructed the area because they needed to expand. And after World War II, there was a lot of police hostility as well, and disenfranchisement, because we talk about the area being so impacted with so many different so many people living in a small space. And while some people had opportunity, not everyone did. So you can imagine the disenfranchisement and being stuck, or the feeling of being stuck, and police brutality and harassment, which was something that was very prevalent and still to this day. So we can imagine that, right? But it was different then, because it was, you know, more like, now it's more veiled racism, where back then it would be definitely overt. And so there's no wonder there was the Watts riot or rebellion or rise up, whatever you want to call it. And it sets the tone for what happens in the future and how we now see it today.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And with the Watts rebellion, obviously it was because of police brutality, and it was demonized in the papers as like people going out of control and all kinds of, just like any other, like the LA riot, same thing. It was demonized after Rodney King. But so how you said now, because of Shelley versus Kramer, you said the housing covenants was unconstitutional, which is a great thing. And now people were able to expand, but then Central was left behind at the same time. And all the vibrance and everything just kind of dwindled down. And then, you know, the Watts rebellion and the civil rights, all of that ended up kind of destroying a lot of the buildings too that were there through the years, because none of that is there anymore. A lot of the empty lots are still there from the Watts.
Yes.
And it's crazy and sad, you know, like they never bothered to rebuild it, like the city government, nothing.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel that there's a reason, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, but I also do believe, like, if it makes sense, it makes sense. And I feel that there has to be an underlying issue where we're not taught about this vibrant community and culture and musical hub, and why they don't rebuild. And we have to, as you've mentioned so many times at Historian Today, we have to, as a community of people, of preservationists, if we'll call ourselves that, I think we can, try to educate and speak out for communities and places and streets or wherever we see their sites, and speak out and try to raise awareness for them. So for everyone, or elevate the voices that are already screaming and can't even scream anymore because they're not heard. At whatever platform we have, we try to use it and try to elevate those voices. So it doesn't get lost, because this is so important and it's so special, and it really is not seen or heard.
No. And just to bring it to present day Central, I just want to each of us go around and kind of give, like, we learned this great history, but now it's pretty much erased. They're trying to bring a little bit back, and we will talk about the Dunbar now. But I did, and I'll start. I went down Central. I mean, I always gone down Central for different things, but for specifically for this research, and you know, there's nothing really significant. I mean, it's a lot of, you know, it is small businesses, little mom and pop shops, you know, trinkets, mechanics, you know, like repair places. Nothing like what we imagine from hearing these stories. I love that we do have these small businesses, but it doesn't, the history that was there before is pretty much not highlighted, and the people that are there now, they probably don't know about it. They don't know that. They don't know the history. They're just trying to survive. So that's why going down Central, you know, there's a part of it that has some homes and apartments and stuff like that. But as far as like the businesses, they're just very small businesses. Nothing really highlighting the jazz era or the African-American community. The city did try to do landmark stops, which are more near than Dunbar, which is good. So what do you guys think now? If you want to go hood historian, what you think now about going down Central?
Well, you know, I feel it, you know, driving down, and I can see the past. You know, I can just picture everything when I drive down Central, how it was, even though I see how it is now. I see what the city of LA did, you know, their jazz park, their jazz signage.
Right.
But like, you know, since I read the old papers and know about the history, I can see how it was. So, but there's nothing we can do besides talk about it,
right,
and educate others about the past, you know, because right now it's like the present owners of the buildings, some of them, they don't even care, you know, they want to make their money, you know, rightfully so, they have to survive, you know.
Right.
But like the past, it's going to be up to people like us to keep that legacy going, you know.
Yeah.
And that's good in a way, you know, that's good because we're keeping it alive, you know.
Right. What about you, Sabrina, going down Central now?
Well, what did we have our adventure probably like 3 weeks ago, a month ago. And, you know, not that I haven't driven through South Central before or down Central. We even go to a group meeting on Central, a little up more, not as down as far as we were, but we do all the time. And I don't really think two thoughts about it, except when we see buildings and when we find a little nugget of history that's exciting. Now that I see it for what it is, and now that I know about the jazz, it feels like when I go to New Orleans, I feel like it's a home away from home for so many different reasons. But part of that is the jazz. And now it's right down the street. It's a hop, skip, and a jump, and it's alive. And the buildings, as long as we have those facades that we can go look at and gawk at and say, oh my gosh, you see all that filigreed, you see all those sharp teeth on the architecture, you see all, you know, the columns or whatever it may be that we like, that it's still there. And we still have the opportunity to keep that alive in us. And I would love to go down there and just go, and we'll talk about the Dunbar in a second, and go to the jazz festival.
They do have a jazz festival I didn't know about.
And I think we're going. I think we have to go at this point. It's an absolute must.
Have you gone?
I haven't been.
Well, you need to go too.
Yeah, yes. Exactly.
And the only way we're going to keep this alive is if we tell and again elevate voices that have already been saying, but tell the people we know and say, hey, come with us to the jazz festival. Have you heard about the jazz from South Central? Do you know anything about this? Do you know what it used to be like? And have those conversations.
And we're at that age, we have to, like, because
we have to.
People older than us are going, and we're our age.
Yeah.
So we have to keep it going for the people under us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just real quick, okay, so we were looking for the Dunbar. We passed it by, like you said, you could skip it, right? And we finally found it. And it's actually apartments for senior and low income. And somebody was coming out of the lobby and we just kind of went in.
Bombarded. We bombarded right in.
But man, like once you go into that courtyard, you go to a different place. It's beautiful. And I'll post some pictures on a different, I'll have Wayne add some pictures of that later, but it's beautiful. Like you could feel the energy too. And then we snuck into the lobby part. Sorry, whoever's listening, but nothing bad. No bad intentions.
No bad intentions. And just
to sit in the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
There's a piano there. There's amazing photos. There's like a lounge area that has period furniture, right? Like furniture from, the 1920s and 30s.
I'd say more 40s.
Like that dark era, right? The dark furniture, dim lighting. And we seen a resident there. And we talked to him. He told us about it a little bit, and he didn't mind that we were there. We're just asking questions, but it feels like a heavy energy, right? Like for me, not in a paranormal way for me, but like you could tell there was like life there. I don't know.
That's paranormal, my friends. There's that. It drew me in with that courtyard with that kind of glass ceiling between the actual hotel. It was just gorgeous. It did remind me something out of New Orleans, as you mentioned when we were there. And I could hear it a little bit humming in my head because obviously there was nobody playing jazz at that moment. But you can picture and imagine in its heyday what it felt like. And when I think of Billie Holiday, I always think of gardenias. And I could just imagine it smelling like fresh flowers and greenery and the talk and the hubbub of people and the excitement of ideas and jazz. And even before jazz, when it was, the Somerville Hotel, these brilliant minds meeting together, talking about how they're going to better their community. It's just so special to be in that space. Yeah. And I could feel it. It was permeating me. And I get, again, chills when I talk about it. I want to go back down there again. And they have a lovely little restaurant right there in the corner that has jazz on Sundays, you said, right?
Yeah, it's called The Delicious at the Dunbar. So we all need to go one day.
Yeah.
And they're going to have live jazz Sundays starting June 5th. So last couple weeks ago, they started. And then it's like a little, little cafe thing. And it pays respects to what it was at the time. So I think that little corner is still nice, right across from Jazz Park. The park is tiny, but it still has something there, right?
Yeah, and the tiles. We saw all the little tiles and stuff. Yeah, it was a cute little area, and it's beautiful to see. There should be more, and it's unfortunate there's not more. But this is a start. And the restaurant, if we go and become patrons of the restaurant, they had a restaurant in the Dunbar's heyday. They had all that stuff there. So we just see it as its new life. It's given new life, and it houses seniors now and low-income people, low-income seniors and low-income other housing. And that's giving back to the community in a sense. And it has new life in it. And that's beautiful.
It's not going anywhere. They still got to, it's not going to get knocked down or anything. So.
And same thing with the YMCA. We happened to see it. This man came out on his bike. And he started talking about it, and not to make a long story short, but he led us into his apartment and to show us the inside of it, of the YMCA. And it's a lot of maybe the doors in the hallway are kept original, but a lot of it is remodeled in the for apartments, studio apartments. But I'm glad that it's still for people that do need it, vulnerable people that have difficulties. And we looked in his apartment, really cute studio. He loves it there. He shared a lot about, his own self. And I thought it was cool. We got able to go in that front part where it says the men's entrance and boys. I guess it's like some kind of nonprofit for youth. So we didn't go in that front part. That front part is separate, but in the back it's like all apartments now.
Elevator,
Wow.
it's an upgrade, but his apartment specifically still had the feel of what probably would have the layout of the room of how it would have looked out originally. And don't worry, guys, I'm the muscle, but also we had a man with us at the time, so don't worry. We don't usually go in apartments with men.
Well,
but we were
he
fine.
was nice. He was nice, but yeah, we were safe. But yeah. So and that happened to be all by luck. Both of those places getting in. I think it was meant to be in some way, but anyhow, that's if any last comments from you talking about Central, I mean, so we could wrap it up. What do you guys want to say before we wrap it up?
I would like to say, yeah, the hood historian would like to say, Central Avenue, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be around. We always can drive over there. We always can patronize the businesses, the new businesses and the old businesses alike. I do want to check that cafe out now, since you guys mentioned that. And the culture, as far as the jazz scene, is gone, but you still can feel the vibes. And we just got to keep that that scene alive, through our posts, on our social media.
Yes.
And let them, because I always, wherever I go, I might say, hey, about that building. I'm always saying something to somebody, about history, so Central Avenue is no different,
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For me, same thing. I'm gonna embrace it in a different way. See it. It's not just Central Avenue. It's more of a place that I'm gonna be able to see as now. Imagining, like how you said, imagining what it was before. I didn't imagine because I didn't know. So now I could imagine what it was and how it felt and how it looked. And you're right about still supporting the businesses that are there now. And even though maybe they're not as nice for, like what back in the day with these architecture buildings, but it's still good to support whatever businesses are there. And also the Dunbar and this cafe that is trying to keep that spirit alive. And in the jazz festival, which we will now we know we could go to. So now it really changed my mind frame and of the street that I had no idea was this important. What about you, Sabrina?
I'll probably just piggyback off from what you're saying. I agree with you both. Patronizing those very vulnerable places for some, and going back to the Dunbar, or elevating its history and elevating that it's still there is really important. It did change my view completely of South Central. Maybe I say completely, it opened my eyes. Maybe that's what I should say, is it opened my eyes. And it also reminded me that everything connects. Everything that we've been talking about in Los Angeles all connects to each other. And that's really important for us to know, is that this stuff happened in history. Yeah. And while South Central was happening here, maybe, and in Boyle Heights or Los Angeles in East LA, we had the Zoot Suit riots. There was stuff happening over here where I live in the harbor area, and throughout the entire world. It happened all at the same time. So it's really important to remember that in Los Angeles, that South Central's not out of Los Angeles. It's a big part of Los Angeles, and it all happened together. And I also just really want to say that while I did feel in the places we went to, like the YMCA, I could feel a little heaviness when we went into the apartments. We didn't talk a lot about the paranormal, so I'm gonna bring it up right now. And definitely in the Dunbar, I could feel the energy more than anything, and it permeated everything in the room. I think the city, moreover, is haunted by a past that it doesn't even know about, or a bad past that it's trying to overcome. And the beautiful spirits from the earliest residents are there to remind us that the culture is still there and the music is still there, and we just need to seek it out. And once we do, we'll see how vibrant it is now. We can make it something, or not we don't live there, but when we listen to the people that live there and we give them space and we are a part of, then we pay homage to all those people before us, and the jazz will live on through us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great outro on that. And yeah, the other part to that is knowing that there was some ugly history that sometimes we overlook living in LA. Oh, this isn't the South. No, it was the same shit, right?
Yeah.
Just designed maybe a little bit differently, but the same thing. And we have to be respectful of that. And but from that negative take, there was some amazing things that happened on that street, and we have to highlight and like you say, pay homage to. So thank you again all. We'll just go ahead and share our handles, and just for the next couple, we when we did the research, I ran into South LA Recap. Have you heard? I think you're following him, South LA Recap. He does videos on South Central, South LA.
Yeah.
So he does a lot of extensive research on South Central. So we might be bringing him to the podcast. Hopefully we set something up with him for the future. And
yes. That's a good page. That's a nice page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to follow me, I'm Doña Junta on Swami Chronicles on Instagram. And you can follow the podcast on Beyond the Facade podcast on all platforms for podcasting, and also on YouTube. We'll get the video out there.
I'm observing spooks and other vices, and you guys know me as Sabrina.
Okay.
And I'm Hood Historian 562 on Instagram.
All right.
Check me out.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And also, we can't forget today. This weekend was Juneteenth. It was another reason why we wanted to do the episode on today, because we're off and we're doing it today.
Yes.
So it's just kind of symbolic. And also, who has a birthday shout out?
Oh, yes. I would like to shout out my handsome husband, Tim. Happy birthday, my love.
Happy birthday, Tim.
Happy birthday.
All righty. All right. Thank you, everybody. You guys have a good night, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
All right. You guys take care.
Bye. Bye, Hood Historian. Thanks.
Bye. See ya.